Hello, insatiable listeners. Allie here. We are officially on hiatus in between season 5 and 6, and we will return on Wednesday, November 21st, with an incredible season. Many of these people have been on my bucket list to interview, and bam, they're coming on the show. This episode will support you during the holidays and make sure you set yourself up the best way you can for 2019. And I can't even believe it's going to be 2019, but it's coming. In the meantime, enjoy these interviews where the tables were turned and I was the interviewee. I'm sure you'll get some more insights from these amazing interviewers and their great questions. Enjoy, and I will talk to you with live episodes on Wednesday, November 21st.
Folks, you amaze me. Over 2,000 of you have uncovered your self-doubt archetype, and you've been sharing your types all over social media. It's thrilling to me to see how well this has been received. If you're curious about uncovering your self-doubt archetype, please do head over to sasspetherick.com. And if you want to understand more about how to move beyond these archetypal patterns of your responses to self-doubt, do check out my new program, Compass. It's all about how to activate self-belief, self-acceptance, self-worth, and self-trust. And alongside this self-paced program, there are monthly Compass coaching calls with me. We'll meet as a group to talk more about the concepts in the program, and I'll be on hand to offer you coaching support to bring your compass alive. It's all for a one-off price of £99, and you can come to as many of the monthly coaching calls as you wish. All the details are on my website. Right, on with today's episode, which is an absolute cracker. Welcome to Courage and Spice, the podcast for humans with self-doubt. I'm your host, Sass Petherick. Welcome. Ali Shapiro's work is completely unique. She is academically, practically, and empathically aware of how the medical system, diet culture, and body positive movements all have their own flavour of crazy. She created her Truth with Food methodology at graduate school while getting her master's degree, and draws from her decade plus of working with real-life clients and her own personal healing journey from having cancer as a teenager. Ali is the founder of Truth with Food, host of the top-ranked podcast Insatiable, and her work is a mashup of skills as a holistic nutritionist, integrated health coach, and her natural rebellion that is completely infectious. Ali and I have been pals for years, navigating the evolution of our coaching work. She's one of the smartest women I know, and I'm thrilled she's here. Ali, welcome to Courage and Spice.
Oh my God, you just gave me chills because you're one of the smartest, most fabulous people I know. So I just feel so grateful that we get to have this conversation.
Yeah, it's feeling like an increasingly important conversation to have, right?
Oh yeah, I saw a quote somewhere that they said the last frontier of feminism is the body. I was like, oh yeah.
Yeah, that feels so true to me. So true to me. So let's start by helping folks get to know you a little better. And I wonder if you can tell us about what you learned about self-belief growing up.
Yeah, when you just asked me that before we started, I was like, wow, I've never thought about that in a way until you just asked me that. And I think, I grew up, I was talking to my sister about this lately. We grew up in a feminist household. We never used that word, but it was just embodied. My parents were both city school teachers, so they made the same amount of money, and they were both educated at the same amount, and we were solidly middle class, and it was a real blended family. My dad was hereditarily Jewish, but didn't believe in religion. He believed in nature. And my mom was a recovering Catholic and grew up on an organic farm and loved nature. It wasn't called organic farming at the time, but it was just farming, but really had a strong connection to nature. And so there were kind of these hippies, but also teachers. And my sister joked, like, even if we ended up in jail, they probably would have been like, what did you learn in jail?
Wow.
So it was this really, really strong place where my sister and we thought women were really equal. And I think that until we got out into the real world, right? And I think it instilled a very strong sense of self-belief. However, what really I had this aha in your question is the big doubt came in with my body. When I was around 5 years old, I was playing gymnastics. Well, I really struggled with asthma a lot. First of all, my mom used to have to take me outside and rock with me and give me humidifiers, and I had really bad asthma. And then when I was in about 5 years old, my parents never got the chemical sprayed on your lawn to make it green, but our neighbors did. And I went over to a friend's house. Her name was Holly Brogan, and had done like somersaults and all that stuff in her yard after it had just been sprayed with chemicals. And I had a horrible bodily reaction. I couldn't go out in the sun. I was itching. We went to the doctors. Nobody knew what was wrong with me. And that was really scary. And I think that really set up this, wait a second, I believe I'm invincible in a way, and no one can tell me what's happening here. And then when I was probably 7 or 8, I don't know, I was in 3rd grade. I still remember the kid's name. I was on the bus thinking, things are great. And he told me that I was fat. And I remember being so ashamed of that and not telling anybody, because who wants to, even though you think you can feel that, you think, oh, people can see that. And I find it very fascinating how it's just in the ether that being fat is bad, right? And my mom had a really strong, healthy body image, I would say. My dad was the one who struggled with food and weight, or was very conscious of it, which probably influenced me. But it wasn't, I think that really seeded the doubt. And then I was bullied severely in 5th grade. And then having cancer when I was 13. So I think I had this really strong sense within my family, but then it feels like the outside world intruded and in big ways to make me feel doubt.
Oh, that's fascinating. I found that as well, that folks who have grown up in a pretty stable, encouraging, supportive background or family, that when that is met by the world's conditions and expectations, that often that's when self-doubt gets planted.
Yeah. And it's such it catches you off guard, right? You're almost because I know even, I took your amazing quiz. I recommend to everybody. It just made me realize how so often, I'm ready to take the chances, but it's in kind of the after effect of and I think that pattern is from, I had this strong sense of self-belief, and then the world's like, oh no, you should be doubting yourself.
Well, I wonder if we can talk a bit about where our two worlds, our kind of work worlds, intersect, and how diet culture and our relationship with our body kind of erodes self-belief in lots of ways. I know that for so many of my clients, their relationship with their body really is like this last frontier. I think that's such a great quote that you said at the beginning there. What's your take on this?
Yeah, well, let's go big picture first. And I think when we talk a lot about mindset, right, in terms of self-belief or food, and I think what we're using is a very Cartesian, Descartes, Newton, that our mindset is just thinking. Right? It's just what we think. But I remember being in graduate school and writing this paper about mind-body connection and just rattling that term off. And I remember my professor, who her PhD is in narrative coaching and storytelling and how that heals. She said, well, how are you defining the mind? And I was like, what do you mean? She's like, no one's been able to locate the mind. She's like, it is an invisible projection of our body and our thoughts and our brain, basically. And I was like, oh, it's like a mobile brain, right? And so if we think of it as mobile and our way of knowing and taking in the world of our sense, we only think about our thoughts. But if we think about different ways we know through our feelings, we know through our senses, right? Our seeing, our touch, our taste, what we would think of as the pleasure or not pleasure, and our intuition. And I think when we have so much self-doubt, we live in our head, and we almost make the problem worse because we don't have access to these 3 other ways of knowing. that would give us really important data. And we're taught not to trust that, right? Don't trust pleasure. Don't trust your feelings. Feelings are bad, right? Anytime you feel discomfort or doubt, it means things are, you're wrong in a way. And then often what I've found, I think in where our work overlaps, is that protective mechanism gets stronger and stronger. And we mistaken that for our intuition often. And we can't tease out what is my gut feeling and what is actually preparing me for the worst. And so I think on a macro level, we just aren't, when we're not in our bodies, we're not getting all the data we need to really feel grounded and make really good choices.
Yeah, that's what I found to be really common, is this sense that if I can just get my thinking right, if I can just control my body with my mind, everything will be okay.
Exactly. And again, the narratives that are set up, I think of these nesting dolls that we have patriarchy first that created, men being more valuable than women. So, and it even created a hierarchy. And then you had, and again, I'm speaking from an American lens of how our culture is set up, but I think the UK and most of the world is set up this way as well, especially as Western culture gets exported. Then you have white supremacy, which sets up an even deeper hierarchy. And then and then that makes the way for capitalism, which then sets up a hierarchy, right, based on class. And what ends up happening is each iteration of this, the feminine archetype gets degraded more and more, which we end up having this, we are widgets, right? Not one. I always say we're a wonder, not a widget. And we use these metaphors like, I've got to fight my body. I have to gear up and crush it, right? In your work, right? Like if people are like, and it's like, these are these very hyper masculine metaphors that we think are just words we're using, but they're actually dictating our entire orientation and what we value. And so what we have then in a culture, which is very matrix-like, is that the body is something that whatever symptom it's giving, if you enjoy food, if you enjoy your work, right? Oh my God, you should be sacrificing. You shouldn't have pleasure, right? Because pleasure is part of that feminine archetype. Or I like using the word yin sometimes because it's not gendered, right? Masculine and feminine is yin and yang. But yeah, it becomes this thing that we don't trust, right? Which is what so much of self-belief is about, is that we can trust the cycles. We can trust pleasure. We can trust discomfort. Pleasure and pain are both part of the yin archetypes. We can trust uncertainty, right? Ultimately, this is to all try to minimize uncertainty, which at its core, I had this realization about a year ago, as I used to say, I don't know if I trust life. I trust myself, right? I have this high self-belief, but I don't know if I trust life to rise to the occasion. And what I finally realized was that's just my projection of, can I trust myself to rumble with whatever unfolds, even if it's devastating?
Yeah. Well, and the other part of this that I'm hearing as well is that this is a really complicated, or it's a really complex system that we are operating within. And what diet culture and fat phobia, which I think it really is, what diet culture and fat phobia sets up to tell us is that there is a quick fix to this really complex, multi-layered experience of being a woman in a body in this world.
Yeah. And it's almost like, I think of it, you could call it Big Papa, Big Brother, but I'm going to give you a formula, which is really telling you, here's how you stay safe, right? I'm going to eliminate any doubt you have. This is what works. And then it keeps you from, it gives you the basic level of safety, which is the expert layperson model, right? Or the doctor patient, or the health and wellness expert, nothing, right? And you just follow the rules, versus the truest sense of belief and safety is, I've embraced this unknown. I've figured out what has worked for me. And it's okay. And I can do that. I am capable of doing that.
Well, and what you just described, I can rumble with whatever happens.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think this is the thing that my senses and my own sort of journey around dieting and being in my body. And I'm like a size 16, like a size 12 or 14 American, size 16, 18 UK. And I decided about 7 years ago that I was just stepping outside of the diet culture, partly because I got to know you and your work, but partly because I was just so exhausted and I could see that it wasn't ever going to work. So I sort of stepped outside to kind of have a conversation with myself around what did I want to embrace from this and what do I want to reject? And I found that actually about 95% of it does not wash with me. And so there's something about sort of having this semi-objective view of how we see women's bodies in the world that has given me this immense sense of liberation and power, which is what I thought getting, quotes, skinny would give me. That actually I have found that through completely rejecting the entire culture that I'm supposed to buy into. And I think that's the part that we don't talk about, right? Is that actually there is an immense amount of agency that comes from accepting your body and being in your body.
It totally will. And you just hit the nail on the head. I think at the deepest level, I think sometimes it's easier to categorize like hungers and cravings as like physical, emotional, and soul level. And I use the word soul. Of course, the academic in me has to define it. Whereas spirituality is how we are all one. And soul is how we're unique and how we're our quirky, wonderful, messy human self. And a client actually in my recent Truth with Food program helped me really articulate this. We were kind of joking. I joke that people who don't have religion find nutrition, right? Or diet culture. And she was like, oh my God. She's like, I realized that my weight loss feels like something meaningful, right? On a soul level, we want to contribute something meaningful. We want to be visible in a meaningful way. We want to make an impact. And she's like, I realized, you said that as a joke, but this number on the scale has become what orients my life around what's meaningful, right? Was I productive because I counted my food? Was it a worthwhile day because I got in exercise, right? And so it orients you towards, I'm making my life count. If I'm getting the body that I think is going to make me the real me, which is a projection of resilience and courage, right? When are we really the real us? When we're more resilient and when we have more self-belief, right? But when we are focused on a specific body, our entire sense of meaning and what we think is productive and what we think counts and how we orient our days and check off the box gets done for us, right? We don't have to think about it for ourselves. So it's a really warped matrixy way of feeling safe. Like, my life counts because I'm working towards this goal that supposedly is going to make my life what I want it to be, but it can't.
Yeah, well, I wonder if it's even like this warped way that we want, because I think one of our core fundamental human needs is to belong. Belonging is essential for our survival on so many levels. But I think on a kind of emotional, maybe soul level, we want to belong, and that requires us to be in some way acceptable. And I think our kind of our consciousness around our own weight and how we judge that is, I think, sort of predicated on, is my weight acceptable? Can I belong here? And so we sort of project that out onto our bodies and onto the world, and we judge other women, and all of that stuff kind of falls into that big soupy mix of those matrices that you mentioned.
1,000%. I always say this is about belonging and the tension between being invisible and visible in the wrong ways, right? And I always tell my clients, if you think about, from an evolutionary standpoint, like I think we used to have web feet and eventually we didn't have web feet, right? Like we kind of grew out of that. But in a patriarchal culture, these past 100 years at most are the first time women have had their own resources. right? Own independent resources. And so this comparing ourselves and competing on our bodies, and let's keep in mind that the definition of beauty changes, right? I mean, being bigger used to be beautiful, right? But we used to have to compete with other women, unfortunately, right? I mean, it was just for survival and resources. We don't have to do that anymore, but it's kind of like an evolutionary, holdover that doesn't need to be we need to grow out of, right? We're kind of coming out of that. I don't know if the web feet metaphor was super apt, but maybe now that we have thumbs, you know what I mean? I know we didn't always have thumbs.
You're reminding me of John Berger, the British philosopher who wrote this amazing book in the 70s called Ways of Seeing, which if you're listening and you're like a photographer or visually stimulated visually, then his book is it's iconic. But one of the things that I remember from that text, and I read it as a women's studies student back in the 80s, is that women judge women. Like we sort of dress ourselves, we adorn ourselves to be looked at by other women.
Yes, I agree completely. And, and part of this isn't just in our heads. When you think of patriarchal white supremacy, and especially capitalistic culture, and we can take a very concrete example of resources being scarce. There's two different levels. Some resources are becoming more scarce. I think about right now where we can live, right? Here in the States, Florida is washing up all these dead fish right now. There's fires in California and all across Montana. Climate change is really creating a scarcity of where is inhabitable, right? I think there's going to be 1 billion refugees by 2050, right? So in some ways, there really is this scarcity of resources. However, to your point about belonging, and I think what our bodies are really about, there is no scarcity of connection and of safety, and of safety and belonging. And I think when it comes to our body, we confuse attention with recognition. Right? Attention is, I'm dressing for other women. I'm getting attention based on my body. But ultimately, that's fleeting. At the end of the day, though, the truer sense of belonging and connection that we're after is really abundant, right? Like the more intimate we are, the more connection we create. There's no scarcity there. So I think we on some primal level, we get that there might be scarcity of resources, right? But on what we really need to survive and thrive. And what diet culture will tell you is that you need the supplements, you need all the fancy workouts, the fancy clothes, all of this stuff to be younger and thinner. That actually isn't, that's attention. And what we're after is that deeper sense of recognition. And I think, I interviewed Angela Sini, who wrote the book Inferior, and she talks about the bonobo culture, which is very matriarchal. And I think part of us dressing for other women and everything is we know we're kind of acting it out in an unhealthy way, but we're craving that deep web of connection that can make us safe, right? We're doing it at a warped level, but we do need each other.
Well, and also it strikes me that when women are dressing for other women, when we are sort of yearning for, longing for that recognition, that do I belong here? Am I safe here? What we're also doing is relying on other people to give that sense to ourselves. And I think one of certainly my own personal experience, and I've seen this so many times with my clients, is that when we can belong to ourselves by, understanding how we feel self-belief, accepting ourselves as we are, even if we want to make changes, right? It's okay to want more or something different, but can you accept yourself just as you are? Can you trust yourself? Do you know how you feel worthy as a human? Like those kind of factors all play into how you belong to yourself. And when you have that sense of a kind of, I call it coming home to yourself, that is how you become sort of less reliant on other people, on trying to be acceptable for other people. So you're able to give that to yourself, and it doesn't require you to morph and change and warp my true nature, be it how we show up in the world emotionally or physically, in order to be accepted.
Yes. I mean, when it takes some clients longer than others to realize this, but often they'll be like, well, I'm feeling fat. And I'm like, but fat isn't a feeling, right? It's some sort of term that we've made. And what I said is I realized it's when I'm feeling really vulnerable. And usually it's when I'm going out into the world of a speaking event and or whatever. And my clients started to realize, oh my God, when when I'm feeling the most fat, it's actually not about my body. It's I'm going to be standing up and I'm belonging to myself and I'm putting myself out there, right? Like I'm giving a big presentation. I'm presenting my ideas. And
whenever we feel at risk.
Exactly. And our culture has told us that fat is bad, your point of fat phobia. And so it's like we grasp onto that because we haven't been told to work on our self-belief or our self-doubt or uncertainty. Instead, we've been handed a shake, and it's like, well, that's not solving the problem. And so then it just grows and grows. And this is why you have people who, by all definitions are thin and still feel fat, right?
Yeah.
Like what is that? Like that is not a feeling. It's this tangled mess of meaning.
Well, and I guess that's the thing is that we've taken this word fat to mean that this is the worst thing a woman can be, which is when you look at it objectively, the most ridiculous, ludicrous con that we've sort of fallen for.
It is such a con because people conflate weight with health, which there's no correlation. I always like to tell people there's an acronym in the health community here, not all of them, but in kind of the wellness doctor community called TOFIs, that it's called, and I don't even like the acronym because they're saying fat on the inside, but it's thin on the outside, fat on the inside. And it's these people who think that they don't have to, quote, care because they're thin. They die at twice the rate as they get older because they're so inflamed, right? Versus we actually have studies that people who carry like an extra 30 pounds are healthier or live longer, I should say.
Yeah.
And
that's the best news ever.
Yeah. But again, it's doubting the body. But I guess it's just, it's this matrix that you have, there's like 1,000 doors that you just have to keep keep going through to separate these things. And also, I kind of joke, I said about when people don't have religion, they find nutrition, but when people find nutrition, they think, oh my God, this diet or this plan is going to protect me from death, right? It's the ultimate vulnerability and uncertainty. And that gets really deep. And you kind of have to work through many layers to see like, and it could be even the death of how we see our life, right? As my client who was like, I have been oriented around this number. And yet if it doesn't matter, what do I do with all my time? Who am I? I mean, this is, and
that's the other part of this, right? And I'm so thrilled that we're starting to talk about this because I think the physicality stuff is kind of the top layer, but you start digging a little deeper and you start thinking about like, what are you actually hungry for?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because it's not usually Doritos. It's not, it just isn't usually. It's something else. What's underneath the easy, quick fix that we give ourselves? And food is comforting, right? There is nothing like treating yourself to something that the taste that you're searching for. There's nothing like it. But also, like, are there ways that you're using food that aren't for nutritional reasons and that are creating a sense of dislocation within you in your relationship with your body or your relationship with food? It's really worth having those conversations with yourself or working with someone like you, Ali, who gets that this is about so much more than how many calories you're taking in every day.
Oh my God, so many. And I think even about your work with self-belief. So what's challenging about food, you've got a couple things. I mean, is that food companies spend hundreds of millions of dollars to not only make the food taste good, but it lights up that dopamine receptor in your brain that basically is rewarding you for bypassing discomfort. So, and then what happens is, especially when it comes to self-belief and self-doubt, often the reason that food is worth it in the moment is because you've been doubting yourself all day. right? And it just like depletes you. And you're feeling that clients will often say the emotions are overpowering me. It's been kind of like a death by 1,000 paper cuts all day. And so the doubt swells so much that in that moment, it really is worth it to numb out from that, because you don't have any resilience. You don't have any skills to have been dealing with the self-doubt. And then your brain lights up. Like you are physiologically, and again, when we think of mindset, it's not just what you think. It's like, I have just been rewarded for ignoring my doubt all day. Oh,
we are just really, really good at finding ways to avoid that discomfort. Right? We're really good at that. And that's all that means about you, is that you're just really good at keeping yourself safe.
yes.
Right. But we put so many value judgments on how we do that and what we do. And there's all this shame attached to it. And I think actually if we started talking more about what self-doubt actually is, which is just how we keep ourselves psychologically safe. So whenever that alarm goes off that says, don't take up that space, don't raise your hand in that meeting, don't tell that person you love them, the thing that is holding us back from that is this primal response: stay safe, stay safe, stay safe. And we respond to that by trying to keep ourselves comforted. So food is such a understandable and natural way to do that.
It is. It's like, it's really brilliant, I think, because it's also, I jokingly call it the good girl self-protection, because like a lot of my clients eat in private, right? They're like, no one's getting hurt here. Like, I'm not shoplifting. No, I'm not taking from anybody. You know what I mean? It's like, and I'm not going to overburden anybody here, you know? And it's a way you can suffer in silence. And I think, especially here in America, I mean, food is everywhere. You know, growing up, we went to the library. You were like never allowed to bring food or drink in. Now the library sells Starbucks and croissants. And, you know, it's like every opportunity we can get to comfort ourselves. Or I found, you know, it's often people are exhausted too, right? Like they're physically exhausted because they're actually malnourished, which is another kind of layer of this matrix. When you know, especially with the low fat craze, I mean, people are overfed, but they're malnourished because they're not getting enough fat, and they're so afraid of fat. And, you know, I just did an episode with Leanne Raymond, who I know you love, and she so admires you. And she was talking about the research about how fat on a woman's body is related to intuition and connected to intuition. And it's
I loved that episode so much. I'm totally linking to it. Yeah, it was beautiful. And I love the way Leanne described that research as, you know, it's like this golden fleece that's on us.
Yes. Yeah. And who doesn't want us to have our intuition, right? It's mysterious. I mean, even though intuition on some level is based on patterns, but it's also mysterious. It's that uncertainty, right? It's this whole like, and when more does doubt come up when you're like, well, I don't have all the data to make this decision. Yeah, it's super matrixy, but at the end of the day, it is about protecting us. But what happens is everything that is protective eventually also becomes, you know, maladaptive, as they would say, or it starts to cost us. And that's what I always say. We did all of this stuff. You know, I was binge eating and emotionally eating, and I was told that I have lack of willpower and discipline, which didn't really, I mean, I believed it, but now looking back, it's like, no, I was trying to basically protect myself from uncertainty that, you know, when I had cancer, uncertainty was life or death. But then because I never built the skills or did the emotional healing to wrangle that uncertainty, everything that was uncertain turned a lot into self-doubt, because then my life fell apart because I wasn't in touch with my own self-belief. I got very disconnected from it, right? It's like my health started to deteriorate. I wasn't dating and I wanted to meet someone. Like I hated my job. And it was just like my life ended up, because I wasn't addressing my self-doubt, my life did become really messy, and weight loss and thinness promised this easy way out, right? It's like a shortcut, even though it's not really a shortcut. The illusion was it was a shortcut. And so I think even wanting to lose weight is this protection because we don't feel resilient, right? When we say we'll be the real us, which is often what I hear from clients, or I'll just feel like the real me, the real us is resilient and powerful, but we've forgotten that. And we have to build that back up, because self-doubt or the emotions that trigger us are still going to be there. We just get stronger and we just get more skilled at dealing with them. And that's really exciting, because then you start to, when self-doubt comes up, you're like, I know this, but I know you connect to, it's safe to feel this. It's not dangerous to feel this. And so,
yeah, I love what you're saying about this idea of the real me. Like, I'll be somehow more authentically myself once I've lost weight, once I have this job, once I'm married, once I have the baby, once I have, the six-figure business in our world, all of those kind of conditions that we place on ourselves, rather than actually looking at who we are right now and what do I love about me right now. I did this thing on Instagram earlier in the year where I asked people, what do you love about yourself right now? And people had a meltdown. They were like, couldn't find things, or is it okay to say this? There was all this kind of apologizing for this thing that I love about myself, as if that somehow you thinking your feet are pretty freaking attractive is going to cause something to warp in the universe. Right. And I think this is the thing that we're victim to all the time, is that we are taught to put all of our attention on how we look rather than how we feel. And it's this massive distraction.
And I even think about like apologizing. It's the metaphor of not taking up too much space, right? And again, if we believe there's a scarcity of how much space people can take up, right? Not only with their physical bodies, but their emotional wins, their soul expression. There's not a scarcity of that. Yeah. And I think that's so important for people to realize. Like the more that you shine, it gives people permission to be like, oh my God, I can say that about myself, but it's scary. And again, I think of the legacy of like witches being burned at the stake. And this is when people are like, you just need to get over it. I'm like, no, because there's, and we know from genetics about how trauma is carried for like hundreds of years, right? And it's like, this is what I think is also the biggest lesson is the body carries memory. The body's ultimately mysterious, right? We want to believe we can control disease, control our weight, all that. We can do some things, but ultimately, I think, Sass, you and I both know from our health history, at the end of the day, it's a crapshoot,
And if you're lucky enough to find doctors who buy into that too, who are like, you know what, we kind of have this theory, but we don't really know.
Yeah,
it's amazing. It's amazingly freeing to just be. To just recognize that there is this mysterious part of us that we are occupying all the time.
Yeah, I know. When I was really so scared about my body, I mean, I used to think every pain was like, oh, do I have bone cancer now or, whatnot. But I used to go to doctors who were very authoritarian, right? Like that felt safe, kind of like the people who voted for the rump. I can't even say his. But it's like now I choose doctors who are like, so Allie, here's the benefits, here's the costs.
Yeah.
It's so much more freeing. I don't want to be with physicians anymore who are like, I have all the answers, because that tells me you're not open to learning, and science by definition is a continuing quest for knowledge. But it's taken me, again, my own self-belief and my own advocacy to learn my body so that I can be on that equal playing field with them, because they do have expertise that I just don't understand. And my own biases is towards natural health. I'll go to a doctor who's integrated, but is very firmly in the center, right? Because they'll bring me back to my blind spot. They'll help me reveal my blind spot. But that's even now when I go to any health or any coach or anyone, I don't want anyone who's going to give me formulas or whatnot, because that's their self-belief that they're projecting onto me. But I wanted that for so long because it was safety, right? It was psychological safety. So yeah, I totally hear you. But ultimately what I was going to say is the body is a mystery, and we are not good with handling that.
It's that thing, isn't it? Like since the age of enlightenment, right? Well, we got these kind of binary opposites of rationality and emotionality. All of these things that have been sort of set up to kind of decide, what we value in our world. There is something about women's bodies that we bleed, we cry, we secrete things. We are the living embodiment of uncontrolled uncertainty.
Yeah.
And I think that's terrifying for so many humans in the world.
Oh, it is totally terrifying. And I still have edges where I'm totally terrified, right? And so I have great compassion for that. And so I get that it's challenging. And I think if we as a culture could be like, oh, this is scary, right? Like we would be so much more interconnected. We would support each other so much more. And then we would have the belonging that would weather when things came like that. And I when you were talking about in our world, like the 6 figures and belonging, I think a concrete example of that is, when I found like you and Jack McNeil, when we started doing those sanity sessions and like really meeting people who had the same values as me, I was able to weather the hits of my business so much better, because what you realize when I talk about attention versus recognition, you guys saw me for what my values were. And I hopefully you feel that I see you, and we appreciate that. It's genuine, it's authentic. And now I can I think of the paradox of like root to rise, right? It's like, so I can root down into that. And it's amazing how I've been more vocal in my work and with my positioning, then I have a community now, and I can unattach from needing everyone to like me. Or when things get uncertain in my business, I'm like, but I have the data and not just, I use the word data, but proof that that my way is okay. It's not for everyone, but it's okay. And I'm okay. And I think when we start to do that with our bodies, of like, we can accept other people's bodies, both thin bodies and heavier bodies and bigger bodies. And, I hate using the word disabled, because I feel like even that sets up like, oh, you're inefficient, when like, so the disabled people that I've met, and I've done some work for the Affordable Care Act around here, they are so resilient. Yeah. They are so creative. I'm like, oh my God, like, will you teach me? It's but if we can just acknowledge that, like, we're all kind of fumbling here with the uncertainty, and that our bodies ultimately are just mysterious. They're also wonderful. We get to feel pleasure in them. We get to taste, we get to see, we get to hear. There's so much joy in them. I think we would all just, I don't know, the patriarchy would crumble overnight.
Yeah, well, I think that's the thing, isn't it? That my sense is that and I don't think that the patriarchy is like a group of guys sitting in leather chairs deciding these rules, right? The patriarchy is systems. It's it's all the ways that determine what we as a culture value. And my sense is that by allowing women to continue to buy into body shame, fat phobia, the diet culture, there's billions and billions of dollars and pounds that are set up to distract us from our potential by keeping us focused on what we look like. That if we start questioning that, which is why I just love the way you show up in the world with this, your signature program is Truce with Food. And it's like, once you get free of that relationship with food that may have been dominating all of your energy and sapping all of your potential, that once you get free of that, you are literally liberated to go do your work in the world, because you are not here to lose weight and pay bills.
Yeah, preach. This is my church. And it would make sense that there is a witchy goddess at the altar. Which is you.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, no, but it's true. And I think, and I think what I want to emphasize though is that, like, our body can help give us the information, the feelings, because often when we deny our feelings, right, because they're quote bad, like they overpower us and we only associate them as bad, or they're only murky. And yet, if we can't have our vulnerability, we can't feel the joy, we can't feel the happiness. And so the body really can be this wonderful instrument, not based on what it looks like, but being rooted in it. It is our home. It's our original home, right?
Well, and I'd also say that for anyone who's listening and thinking, I genuinely want to lose weight, this is the beauty of your work, Ellie, is that people come and do your program, and they may want to make peace with their bodies, they may want to change their bodies, but that is what you are it's all evidence-based research, which I respect up the wazoo. But what you are actually doing is taking the lid off the diet culture and giving people who come on your program the agency to make different choices that are based in their own experience and kind of knowing themselves and developing self-trust and self-belief, so that if you want to lose weight, those options are there for you and you don't have to go into battle with yourself.
Yeah, because I think about too, Sass, you really do beautiful work with attachment theory. And if you think about attachment metaphorically, when we're first born, we're fed, right? And we know that we're safe if we're fed. It doesn't matter if you're breast, bottle, whatever, like you're not making it out of the beginning months if you're not fed, right? And so I think archetypally, we're often eating to reattach, right? To like root into who we really are if we don't have a strong attachment to ourselves. Mm-hmm. And if we can look at it that way, again, to your point about it being really brilliant, we can learn food can be metaphorically something that does support us. We don't have to just say, oh, I'm going to eat whatever I want. Although sometimes you do that. And that, we always say, like, every time you're kind of seeing a new angle around the story that's protecting you, you maybe go quote unquote, we don't use the word off track, but like we call like, okay, you're unclear in your story again. But yeah, there is foods that can support you and give you the clarity and the calm so that you can really be at home with yourself and firmly rooted in your self-belief. Yeah. Sometimes weight loss is a side effect. Sometimes it's not. The ultimate goal is let's separate weight loss as being healthy and let's really figure out how to value my health and my body in a very neutral way. I don't believe one diet works for everyone. There's no dogma. Yeah. It's just like entering into your own body.
I think what you're doing is inviting people to have a conversation with themselves, with their bodies, that is dogma-free and has no value, judgment, or expectation of the outcome or of how that relationship will evolve. And there is so much freedom in that because you're just literally creating the space for that.
Yeah. And allowing people to trust their own pace, right? I think that's part of the diet culture is like, all right, you got to take care of this yesterday, right?
Yeah, 7 pounds in 10 days. Yeah.
And it's like, that is so unhealthy, by the way. Yeah. Like, I identified these 3 patterns that we go into with our body, the battle modes. And one of them is the competitor mode. And the competitor mode is always like faster, better, I'm behind, I'm not winning. And it's like one of the behaviors that competitors do is set like unrealistic deadlines for themselves. And then they end up feeling like they're sabotaging when really their body it's like, this is not working.
Yeah. Well, and I can totally see that whole all or nothing, good food, bad food. Have you been good this week? Oh my God. I've been to Weight Watchers so many times over the years. And that used to make me want to punch my leader in the face. Have you been good this week? Because you've lost 2 pounds. And I just thought, oh, why am I here? You kind of have this existential crisis. Like, really? Is that where we're at? And the messaging that we have helps fuel that natural competitiveness.
I have a funny Weight Watchers story. I had been there, I did my first Weight Watchers at 11. I had dabbled many times, but the last straw for me, I was in my early 20s and my sister and I were both living in Philadelphia and we went to this meeting together, of course, because that's another belonging technique is let's diet together. It was around Christmas time and our leader, he was a man, very flamboyant, and he had lost like 80 pounds and he would always like tuck in his shirt and show us like how many belt loops, right, that like he had been able to use. And he was like, okay guys, we're playing a point game. He's like, it's Christmas time and you're going to want to cheat, so he's like, how many points are a lick off of the Ben & Jerry's ice cream? And we're all like, 1. Well, of course I'm observing because that's what I do to protect myself. I'm like, I'm not diving in, right? I'm just going to observe. And everyone's like, 1. And he's like, right. And he's like, 3 tinfoil Hershey Kisses. And everybody's like, 3 points. And he's like, yeah, 1 ounce of cheese on an appetizer. And everybody's like 3. And he's like, 6 points. And everybody in the room went, oh, and I was like, I got to get out of here. Like, it was hilarious, but I was like, if this is what we're so aghast over,
Yeah.
It's like, I got to get out of here. I mean, I left and I never went back. Yeah. But at the time I was in the matrix. I mean, and again, I'm still in the matrix, I'm sure, right? Like if you think you're out of the matrix, that's like a sign you're still in it.
Yeah. I have that with self-doubt as well. Like I think I know more about self-doubt than most humans. And yet I still have moments where I'm like, oh, wow, hang on a second. The thing that I know to be true is that because I have the tools that I teach all the time with the people I work with, is that I can just interrupt the impact that doubt is going to have on my life. And I can do that quickly, and it's pretty easy for me to recognize it and to move out of it. It feels to me like that's what your work is about too, is about setting up some really beautiful ways that you can support yourself, recognize when you're falling into an old story or going deep down the rabbit hole of the matrix, and you can interrupt that and kind of support yourself compassionately to make different choices.
Yeah, to kind of, I think about the example I gave earlier when my clients said they start to feel fat and they can realize that, oh, they're going to be visible, or they're worried about being invisible or misunderstood is another word that comes up a lot. And even just the clarity and distance to realize, oh my God, what's happening is huge. And so I would encourage everyone listening, next time you're feeling fat or frustrated with your body, where are you feeling at risk? I love that word, the way that you phrase that, Sass.
Yeah.
And then you can start to get to the root of the real issue and then work on that.
I love that this is the work you're doing in the world. I think anyone that I have sent your way to listen to the Insatiable podcast or get to know just you comes back saying, oh my God, this woman has been hiding. Why haven't I known about her? So I'm super excited that more and more people are going to get to know the super important work that you're doing.
Well, thank you so much. And I would tell you too, your episode when you came on Insatiable, why is weight loss so hard? But we really talked about technical versus adaptive change is one of the most popular on Insatiable. So maybe link to that as well, because people love that episode with you because you're a smarty goddess.
Right back at your friend. You can subscribe, rate and review Courage and Spice, the podcast for humans with self-doubt, wherever you get your podcasts. I'll see you next time.